Good evening. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us to explore this crucially important topic. My name is Susan Kohout, and I am currently serving as chair of the Door County League of Women Voters. League is a trusted, nonpartisan political organization. While we never endorse a candidate or a party, we are directly involved in shaping the important issues that keep our community strong. We are an organization of women and men which encourages informed and active participation in government in two ways. We are best known for our voter service activity, informing and encouraging citizens to participate in our elections. Our second priority is to address issues. We work to increase understanding of major public policy issues and to influence them through education and advocacy. We study issues, we form positions, we act. Our program tonight is a product of a 7-year project on the issues of mental health and/or substance use in our community. Our goal has been to try to understand how Door County addresses mental health and substance use in relation to our criminal justice system, our mental health system, and informal support systems, and to advocate to improve things. At present, we have 2 dedicated groups of members and other citizens working in either our education or legislative subcommittees, or both. Our legislative subcommittee is monitoring local and state government in order to advocate for the resources and policies to serve our community better. Tonight's program has been organized by our education subcommittee in an effort to inform our citizens and members on the status of the mental health of our young people and the services available to support them and their families. We hope the information helps people meet their needs and also builds an informed citizenry that can lobby their local and state officials to provide needed resources. The amount that League accomplishes is limited only by the number of people that are willing to work on important issues. Please consider joining our efforts. Review the materials on the tables and sign up for more information. We need and welcome your help. This is the 5th event of our Eileen Bone Speaker Series. Eileen was a longtime member of the Door County League, moving here in the 1960s and getting so involved that by the early 70s she was president of the local chapter. You will see pictures of her up there. Even in later years, when health intervened, not allowing her to be so active, she was always a voice of reason, calmness, and wisdom that could be called upon by current leaders for her flawless judgment and discretion. When Eileen died in 2016, her family generously donated money in her memory to establish the Eileen Bone Speaker Fund. The fund is being used to provide quality programs in the county each year on topics of importance to the League. Eileen was very committed to a wide range of issues and worked hard over the years to promote good government. We are very grateful to her family for helping us continue that work. Eileen would have had a particular interest in tonight's program, having worked for many years as a speech pathologist in the county schools. So many people are part of presenting a program like this. I'd like to begin by thanking Crossroads at Big Creek for hosting us, and join them in acknowledging the First Nations people who are the original inhabitants of the region, having ancient historical and spiritual connections to the land their preserves now encompass and to the land and water they now steward. Thank you to the Education Subcommittee and many other League members who pitched in to make this happen. Thank you to Laddie Chapman and his assistant Derek Demise, who will create a videotape of this program, which will be available on our website and Facebook page, and are also helping us with a first for us tonight. we are live streaming on our YouTube channel. And a special thank you to the 4 ladies you will meet shortly, not just for presenting this program, but who have devoted their professional lives to addressing these issues and helping others. A few housekeeping items. For those who have not already found them, refreshments will be available during the break and after the program. Bathrooms can be found down the corridor to the left at the bottom of the stairs. If you have not already done so, please silence your cell phones. Another item that is very important to us is that you have all signed in. On the table that you saw when you came up the stairs, you found 3 clipboards. If you are a member, you simply need to check your name off on the membership list. If you are a non-member, we'd like you to sign in simply so we know you are here. And if you have an interest in getting our information, our newsletters, you can put contact information. But you don't have to do that. We'd just like to know that you were here. There is another sheet there that you can check off columns to get involved if you are so inclined, and it lists all of our different areas. Voter Service, Observer Corps, our DEI committee, the 2 subcommittees I spoke about, our policy, our website committee, and we even have a new committee this year on natural resources. There's one final sign-up sheet on the table with the trifold about our mental health project, and that is a sign-up for getting some of the material that Shauna will provide you after the program. She is willing to provide you with the PowerPoints, slides that she has, and also the document that includes all of the study that she's going to report on. So sign up there if you want that. Last, but definitely not least, I need to tell you about something called the Community Book Club Project. This is a project that's being conducted by a coalition of organizations, including Door County Public Health, Door County Library, United Way of Door County Mental Health Focus Group, the League, and NAMI, which is the National Alliance on Mental Illness. And it is a book discussion project regarding this book, You Are Not Alone. You will see one lone copy up there. There was, I think Shauna was able to get a grant so that there were copies that came into the county and were available in our libraries, which could be taken and then shared with others if they want. You can also check out copies through the library system. There's also on little half sheets. You can find out how to get it on Hoopla if you want to listen to it on your iPhone. It's a very readable book, and I think it's a book that you can learn some things with, even if you don't read it cover to cover, if you chose those titles that are of interest to you, there's a lot of good information, and it is very readable. Its author, Dr. Ken Duckworth, is the Chief Medical Officer for NAMI. And there are 3 events associated with this, and they are in April. There are 2 book discussions, one in Sturgeon Bay, one at Sister Bay, and again, that information is on those half sheets. I can tell you now, but unless you're writing them down, you know, so go grab one of the sheets, and you will also see information in the community on this. And then on Saturday, April 29th, right here at Crossroads, Dr. Duckworth will come and speak as the author of this book, and I'm sure he'll share a lot of good information. That's at 3 p.m. So, and now, as they say, on with the show. So we will begin with our presentations, and then we'll take a short break and return for a question and answer period. And we will adjourn no later than 7:30. 7:30.
You want to stay that long?
Yeah, unless you, we could talk all night.
We're pretty fun.
We're good.
Most of us talk for a living.
Yeah.
Is that not enough, or is that too much? I'm not sure. Okay, we'll see how that goes.
Our time is your time.
Yeah.
Our first speaker is over to the far right, and that is Shauna Blackledge. She will present the results of the 2021 Youth Risk Behavior Survey. Shauna is the health educator at Door County Public Health, where she started in September. Prior to that, she was a community impact coordinator of health at United Way, serving as Door County's AOD coordinator. She grew up in Green Bay and went to college at UW-Madison for business. And I'm told her resume reads heavy with Harley-Davidson and their subsidiary companies. She moved to Colorado in 2011 on a whim, where she spent 10 years, minus the year on the road, gallivanting the country in an RV with a newborn. Oh, to be young.
Love that.
Shauna came back to Wisconsin in June of 2021 with a husband and 2 beautiful boys and landed in Sturgeon Bay, where most of her family now resides. She's happy to be working in a field that captures her passion of helping others in the area of health education and engaging with her community. Motorcycles aren't exactly a passion of hers.
Not anymore.
Go ahead, Shauna.
All right. Hi, everyone. Thank you for the introduction, Susie. So yes, we are going to talk about the latest Youth Risk Behavior Survey data. Let me make sure I can click through this. Ooh, there we go. So the Youth Risk Behavior Survey, or the YRBS, is put on by the CDC. I'm happy to report that all 5 of our Door County schools participate in this survey. It happens every other year. And it analyzes questions that are leading causes of death, disability, and social problems amongst our youth. Of our Door County schools, this last survey had a 76% participation rate. So for the high schoolers, 843 students completed this survey. So really good data set. It's also administered at the middle school level, so we can see trends kind of starting with those preteens through their teen years. And so it's issued on a county level. We get statewide reports and then national reports, so we can kind of benchmark against those. Ooh, I'm off the screen. So in Wisconsin, I have a great one-pager I can give y'all at the end here, and this is some data from the Wisconsin summary. So over half of all Wisconsin students reported significant problems with anxiety in the past year. The numbers are even worse for female students and students who identify as lesbian, gay, or bisexual. So some graphics, 2 or 3 students report female students report problems with anxiety. 80% of LGBT students reported problems with anxiety. Looking at depression, so these questions ask for prolonged sadness and disinterest from regular interest activities. Over 1/3 of all Wisconsin students reported problems with depression in the past year, and the numbers again are even worse for female students and students who identify as LGB. They only ask high school students to identify as LGB for the sake of this survey, and that they do keep it to those categories. They don't have a transgender category on there at this point, but then you see the disparities when students identify as LGB, that 66% reported problems with depression, and our female students, again, the teen female population is just hitting a kind of a wall here lately with their data, reporting much higher rates of anxiety and depression than their male counterparts. All right, so on suicide, over the past 10 years, more students reported seriously considering suicide. It was 18.1% in the past year. At the same time, the number of students who said they could get help when they felt distressed has decreased. So only 22.4% of students said they could get help. Again, females were twice as likely to report seriously considering suicide and twice as likely to actually attempt suicide. And almost half of our LGB students reported seriously considering suicide, which is 4 times as high as their peers. LGB students are also 4 times as likely to actually attempt suicide. So I would put some state trends here off of the surveys that we had for the last 3 years. This is high school data. So you can see some downward trends in some things that would probably benefit mental health. So participation in school activities, feeling like you belong, having a trusted adult at school, and getting help if you need it. All of these declined over these surveys, so we're seeing that unfortunate trend. I will mention at the same time, we've actually seen a decrease in reported drug and alcohol use amongst our teens. Big declines in cigarette smoking. There was some drop in vaping rates from 2017 to 2021. So we see kids kind of making some better choices in their lifestyles, but then we see this decline in mental health. I'm not saying they're affiliated in that way, but we have them on the right track in some areas, but for some reason we're having less engagement in school and keeping their mental health on track. One of the questions on the survey asks about their overall health. So how do students view their overall health? And this has just been a steady decline. I had the data from the last 10 years. And things like reporting using technology between midnight and 5 a.m. is higher, so students are getting less sleep. We see less consumption of plain water, less daily breakfast consumption, higher obesity. So when you think about overall health, I think they're playing in some of their physical health, but now they're recognizing mental health as a big piece of that. But that might be adding to this downward trend in overall health. Looking at mental health and bullying. So you can see the data here with bullied at school, about a quarter, bullied online, about a fifth. So overall, about 29% report bullying. And then just this is the Door County data set. So reporting anxiety, half of our student body, high school level reports anxiety, 30% report depression. But then I plug in what are I said LGBT numbers here, but if they identify in that group, then their numbers are through the roof. And I'll mention too that in all areas, our female student population reports higher percentages and rates of these issues as well. And we do have in Door County significantly higher rates of bullying compared to the state. So never good to be worse off on that benchmark, but wanted to share that. Now looking at the data set for Door County on suicidal thoughts and behavior, you can see 16% of our high school students are considering suicide. 14% have made a plan. 23% have intentionally self-harmed. And 5% have attempted suicide. And again, with the LGBT population here, those numbers skyrocket. Some additional disparities that the Youth Risk Behavior Survey looks at are things like those with physical disabilities, which generally has higher rates of mental health problems correlating. Things like special education services, they're worse off generally in all these areas as well. And food insecurity is a really big one. So if kids are reporting food insecurity at home, the YRBS survey does a data set to see where their numbers fall, and it falls off. I mean, it's bad. So just some things to consider. And so if you do want the complete survey, they're available through DPI, but I can send those out. But you can look at those broken down surveys by some of these categories just to see. So you can see female versus male population. You can see those that had a health condition or had food insecurity reported. So then overall, just some trends. It's probably a little hard to see. So the top line is self-harm has increased, considering suicide is the middle red line there, and then a suicide plan. All have increased, especially from 2019 to 2021. We know COVID was happening and there were lockdowns, and so kids were starting to feel the impacts of that by the time they took this 2021 survey. We know there was a decline in mental health during that time. Overall, suicide has stayed at about that 5% point, but there's been especially the self-harm rates have gone up a lot for the teen girls. And then just pointing out a couple more items. So this was a chart from the CDC just showing that dramatic increase. Nearly 3 in 5 U.S. teen girls felt persistently sad or hopeless in 2021, double the rate of boys. And then I will note that although I said we're doing better in the drug and alcohol area, the teen girls are still using drugs and alcohol at a higher rate than their male peers, and they are reporting higher rates of bullying and sexual violence, which could play into mental health. And then this just shows the sexual violence data. There's been a 20% increase between 2017 and 2021 of teen girls who said they experienced sexual violence. If you look at the Door County data, that's 25% of our teen girls reported experiencing sexual or dating violence, which would be 1 in 4. It's just record high levels. So when we consider rape, for the last 10 years, the number of those who were physically forced to have sex was around 10 or 11%, and it jumped from 11 to 14% from 2019 to 2021. So that means for every 10 teenage girls, at least one of them has been raped. Just one more item to kind of talk about is just, we know screen time is a big topic right now, and what that impact is. I will note that there's definitely different studies that have happened, different ways to look at this. Some studies look at mood and attention, memory, or sleep and the impacts. But then also you have to consider, is screen time doing your homework? Is it watching a movie? Is it reading a book? Is it an interactive game? Or is it, a violent video game? So it's really hard at this point to totally decipher the screen time impact. But this new poll says 88% of Americans do recognize social media as at least somewhat responsible for the decline in mental health amongst teenagers. And generally, the surveys, although they seem to have a hard time pinpointing exactly what's what, there's statistically significant associations between screen use and measures of well-being. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Allie, over to Susie to give Allie's intro.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Alicia Bretl, who is a stride provider and will discuss her work as a therapist in the Sturgeon Bay and Algoma schools. Allie was born and raised in Door County, a Southern Door graduate, who went on to complete a dual bachelor's degree in psychology and chemistry at Ripon College before pursuing her master's degree of clinical social work at the University of Maryland, Baltimore. This included 2 clinical internships specializing in clinical behavioral health. After graduation, she moved back to the Midwest and worked as a residential treatment center, where she worked with dual diagnosis clients with a trauma-informed approach. Allie has been providing behavioral health care services at Door County Medical Center for the last 2.5 years, practicing in Sturgeon Bay Clinic, the Algoma Clinic, Sturgeon Bay Schools, and the Algoma Schools. Go ahead, Allie.
I'm all over the place. Okay, so perfect. So you heard a lot of words from Shauna. Key points in terms of, you heard the word anxiety a lot, you heard the word depression a lot, you heard the word suicide a lot, substance abuse. So my portion of the program is to really truly delve into a little bit more of what those words mean and how we see those words, but also how we feel those words. So first things first, anxiety. What is it? How do we feel it? And what does it look like? So first and foremost, you talked about tech. Hello, my notes are on my phone. This is a terrible example. I guess I'm the millennial in the room. Okay. So what defines anxiety? It's intense and excessive and persistent worry and fear about a specific aspect, people, places, things, events, interactions, so on and so forth. I like to say, and I like to tell all of my patients, that on some level, us as humans experience a certain level of anxiety, right? Like, we call that our baseline, right? And then how that then impacts our day-to-day is then how we have to deal with it, right? Does it impact our entire day-to-day that inhibits us from being able to leave our house, or inhibits us from being able to go to work or interact with others? So that is, like, people always like to say, okay, so at what point do we have to then treat anxiety? It's really when that anxiety significantly impacts how our day-to-day functioning is. There are different types of anxiety. You have a generalized, I can go down the list of like diagnoses, but I don't necessarily know that I need to do that with you. There's, I guess, an overarching like generalized anxiety. Another big caveat is PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, which usually is a diagnosis that takes place after a significant traumatic event. And then social anxiety, and I think a lot of what Shauna had talked about in terms of bullying, that's where a big chunk of where we see social anxiety come after. What does anxiety feel like? So in the room, who has heard of a fight or flight response? Yeah? Oh, yeah, fantastic. So I like to say that anxiety is part of our fight or flight response in our parasympathetic nervous system. Oh my God, easy for me to say. So it's usually as a result of some type of stimulus, usually danger, or that essentially enacts our fear response. And that tells our body, and then tells our brain what we need to do with it. And then we either need to implement some sort of coping skill, or we need to do something for ourselves to make ourselves feel a little bit more safe or protected. The question up there is, can anxiety be useful? And I always get such weird looks whenever I talk about this, because a lot of times you're like, no, Allie, like anxiety can never be useful. Actually, it can. So I really tell a lot of my students this when I work with them, because they always view anxiety as such a negative thing. And yes, of course, especially if it's negatively impacting our day-to-day, right? But in terms of how it can be useful, this is a good example that I use all the time, is when a student is experiencing some type of anxiety related to a test, right? They could totally use that as a fuel to help them study, help them basically understand the material a little bit better in order to do as well as they can on the test.
Or like have all your printouts and slides and be completely paranoid about public speaking.
Or have all of your stuff on your phone. But it also is a really good mechanism to help us understand what our body is doing and what our body is trying to tell us, right? So, Shauna over here, her level of anxiety, I'm trying to totally call you out.
I love it.
Her level of anxiety is actually quite high right now. And that's what her body is telling her, right? Like, I do this all the time. And so I'm just having a conversation with y'all, right? So, my anxiety is maybe not as high as Shauna's, which is totally fine. So that's just a couple of examples of how it can be useful. What does anxiety look like? So it can be mild, it can be short-lived, or it can be persistent, intense, severe, significant, to the point where it causes a great deal of distress and limits our ability to engage in our daily functioning. So because this program is specifically targeted towards youth, I put a couple common symptoms of specific youth, but I would also argue that a lot of times adults also experience many of these symptoms, maybe not to a certain extent as youth, but so often I hear, oh my God, Allie, I just need a fidget. I hear that so many times, right? Like always needing something tactile in their hands, super restless, really difficult to focus on the task at hand. Stomach aches, headaches. Oh my God, I need to go to the nurse's office because I don't feel good. Changes in eating and sleeping patterns. That was a big chunk of what Shauna had talked about too, right? Like I can't fall asleep at night, so I'm gonna go on my phone, right? I wake up in the middle of the night, I'm gonna go on my phone. Negative thoughts or worries, of course, irritation, frustrations. This is another good one. Appear to be more clingy, right? Like I'm not a parent. I'm a dog parent, but I'm not a parent myself. But a lot of times, moms and dads are like, "Oh yeah, I love like how my kid always wants to come up and hug me," right? And that's not a bad thing, right? But it could be an indicator of potential anxiety. I love when my dog is always all over me. Avoidance or isolation, so never wanting to be in common spaces of either the school, classroom, or at home too, specifically. Like always wanted to be in their room, always wanted to be on their phone, always wanted to be playing video games. We're taking questions at the end, right, Susie? We're taking questions at the end? Okay.
Yes.
Fantastic. So what maintains What maintains all of these symptoms of what we just talked about, right? So a big one is enabling. I don't really love that word, but it's so true. And that could either be encouraging the avoidance or encouraging to just like succumb to the fears. Cognitive distortions cognitive distortions are what we tell ourselves about whatever is in front of us, right? So, for an example, social anxiety, right? I'm not going to go to this party because I know everyone's going to hate me, right? Or I know that everyone is going to hate what I wear. I hate my clothing. So on and so forth. That's something that we tell ourselves that's not necessarily a fact. It's just what we believe. A lack of coping skills. And conveniently, I have a nice child-friendly graphic that I actually give a lot of my kiddos as different ideas as to what type of coping skills that they can use. We'll get there shortly. Coping skills. A lot of times, especially with anxiety, it's our ability to just soothe in the moment, right? Because like with anxiety, all five of our senses are so heightened that we're just like either shaking or fidgety, right? So a lot of times it is our ability to help self-soothe. With that, especially for helping manage PTSD symptoms, post-traumatic stress symptoms, we like to use some grounding techniques. So that's anything that will help us stay grounded to the present. Rather than having our mind go like 5 steps backwards or 5 steps forwards, it's our ability to be in the present and actually just be, right? Like be with what our surroundings are. And then body relaxation techniques. This is my favorite one because it's a lot of times it's just our ability to, right? Like wherever we're tense, it's our ability to just let it go. I always use that language too when I'm working with kids specifically. Let it go, right? Calm, like. From head to toe, right? We're going to tense, and then we're just going to relax. We're going to tense, and we're going to relax. It's a good example. So that, there we go. That is anxiety. Moving on to depression. So depression, this definition is a mood disorder that causes a persistent feeling of sadness, loss of interest, and can interfere with your daily functioning. We all experience sadness though, right, Allie? Yeah, we do. So again, it's like we had a loss, right? Of course we're going to be sad about it, right? We experienced a negative event. Of course we're going to be sad about it. It's if that sadness is 1, persistent, but 2, like I said, impacts day-to-day functioning, right? That sadness impacts your ability to even get out of bed in the morning. That sadness impacts our ability to take a shower. That sadness impacts our ability to get to work or to school, right? And that's when it becomes problematic. There are different types of, I love how I put question marks in here. There are different types of depression. The most common that when we think of depression is clinical depression or major depressive disorder. There can be, a big term, especially in the Midwest, we hear seasonal affective disorder, right? That's a pretty large caveat of depression in terms of when we only see the daylight for 8 hours in a day, right? Like that's when seasonal affective disorder kicks in. Or we have not seen the sun in 7 days, right? Like that's usually when sadness starts to creep in. Or weeks. Good point, Amy. We're almost to April. So what does depression feel like? So it's super, super important, and I probably should have put this on the anxiety slide too, but it's super, super important to recognize that two people don't experience depression the same way, right? So like how I experience sadness or depression is not how Shauna experiences it, or not how Cami just experiences either, right? So it's important for us to check in with ourselves about what our body is telling us and what our mind is telling us. So causes, a lot of times, right, all of that causes a significant symptom that affects the way that you feel, the way that you think, the way that you navigate daily activities, the way you interact with people, the way you do your job, so on and so forth. Also important to note that sometimes these symptoms will just happen all of a sudden. Sometimes these symptoms will just gradually get worse. Symptoms can be mild, short-lived, or persistent and severe, and could cause a great amount of distress, and could restrict some of your day-to-day life. Again, because this is specifically targeted towards youth, but also adults could experience the same type of symptoms. Common symptoms are listed up there, but a big one, I always hear this word too, is like, I just feel numb, Allie, right? Like I don't feel anything. I feel empty. I hear that often. Appetite changes, sleeping changes, to play off of what Shauna said too, negative thoughts about yourself, negative thoughts about others, thoughts that you would be better off dead, thoughts that you're a burden. That's a big one. Yeah. So, what I see at school. As a stride provider, I have, and a school-based now, we don't have stride in Kewaunee County, but I call that school-based services. So as a school-based provider, behavioral health provider, I'm fortunate enough to go into Sturgeon Bay Middle School and High School every Wednesday morning and provide services to an array of students with different backgrounds. And then I go into Algoma Middle School and High School on Tuesday afternoons. So my beginning of the week is full of school, which I'm obsessed with. But what do I see? This is just a brief list, and I say brief, it's brief, list of a lot of the symptoms and a lot of the situations that I see or have seen at school. So a lot of times I hear from teachers or guidance counselors saying that it's difficult for students to be kept on task, right? Or difficulty focusing on a specific homework assignment, test, so on and so forth. Lack of initiation or motivation. So many of my students are like, yeah, I have like 30 missing assignments. I'm like, you have 30 missing assignments? That's another large one that I see often. Disorganization, disrupting in class too, right? Like feeling like they need to be the center of what's happening because they're the center of their world, right? So why can't they be the center of everybody else's world? Avoidance or isolation. I need to go to the nurse's office because I don't feel good, right? That's such a big one. Can I just go sit in the guidance counselor's office because her office feels safer for me, right? And then, did you put the... Perfect. We can maybe keep this to the end too, if we want to come back to this. But I have done a lot of presentations just in the community, especially for parents. And they always ask like what type of community resources we have available to Door County youth. So I can mention, obviously, like us at Door County Medical Center. We provide individual and family counseling. There's so many other, an array of other providers in the county as well that can provide the same type of services. And a plug for the youth group that they are starting to over at Jack's Place. So medication management is always available. Of course, like me, this is my own personal opinion, and I bring this into my everyday practice. I'm definitely not a huge proponent of medication management, especially for youth, just because we would like to self-regulate first before that's me. This is my personal opinion, but we like to self-regulate before we introduce medication. But I also recognize that there is a place and time for medication, especially when that self-regulation isn't helping and can't be consistent. That's obviously available. Like I said, support groups. And then I know the schools are working so hard to be able to provide a lot of educational resources for them too, right? So help with tests, extra time, for tests or testing in general. Quiet rooms, or I think they call them Zen dens. I think that's what they call them in Sturgeon Bay. I know. I found a Zen den.
I want a Zen den.
I know. So like different spaces, right, where kids, if they're feeling really overwhelmed or feeling elevated, then they can go there to just help with those self-soothing. This is, you're gonna talk about stride, right? So that's Cami will talk to you guys about stride. Yeah, and I think that's it. I think that's it. Yeah. Holy buckets.
Holy buckets.
All right, are you thinking of your questions?
Please.
All right, next we will hear from Cami Peggar, who will present the STRIDE program and some other county-based mental health programming for youth. Cami is a community impact coordinator of health for United Way and oversees the STRIDE school-based mental health project. As a community coordinator, she offers community-based programming for youth in need of mental health services, works with school staff and administration to better understand the mental health needs in schools, and hosts training and events on mental health subject matter for the community. Living in Door County her entire life, Cami considers herself lucky to be a member of this community and is devoted to helping remove the barriers that continue to limit access to necessary services. And I have to give a special thank you to Cami. She is also a very active member of our education subcommittee. I don't think we function without Cami, to be honest with you.
You guys would
So
function
thank
just
you.
fine.
I don't function very well without Kimmy. Let's be real.
Then you know the feeling.
Okay, so STRIDE. STRIDE stands for Strengthening Trust and Resilience, Instilling Independence, and Discovering Empowerment. And before I get into the nitty-gritty of what we do and offer, I want to go over some other unique barriers that Door County has, which prevent youth and families from accessing these mental health services that you've heard we so clearly need. Our provider ratio, our mental provider ratio in Door County is extremely low. We have about one provider for 720 people. Compare that to Wisconsin, that's about one provider to 440 people, and national average is one provider to 250 people. So we love our providers, but we just do not have enough of them. Many of our providers are also in Sturgeon Bay, especially until Door County Medical and Sister Bay opens up. And if you can imagine being a Northern Door or Southern Door family, driving to school, taking your student out to go see a mental health provider for an hour-long appointment takes a lot of time throughout the day. You need to have reliable transportation, and you need to have gas money. Those can all be barriers. On top of that, there's also the cost of seeing a provider, high deductibles, or lack of insurance, which really prevents families and youth from getting those services. Excuse me. So we created STRIDE to really target those barriers and get some of these youth that need services by our local providers in the schools. We began providing services in 2018. We've partnered with our local mental health providers, and they actually go to the school 1 or more days a week to offer services to youth. Now, youth can be referred to the program either through a parent, a teacher, or if a student, talks to a parent or a teacher. If they hit one of those barriers, they can be admitted into the program, and all 5 of our Door County Public School districts offer STRIDE. So as of now, these are all of our partners. We have 8, almost 9 now mental health providers on our team, all 5 school districts, and then United Way. How we partnered each of the schools up with our mental health providers, and then they go to the school 1 or more days a week throughout the school year. Like Allie said, she goes every Wednesday morning. We have some schools that have a full day, some schools that have a day and a half, that these providers are seeing students. Okay, let's see where I am here. So back in 2018-19 school year, that was our first year providing services. We saw 33 students being meeting with the stride provider. The 1920 school year, 39 students met with the provider. 2021 school year, 46 students met with the provider. And then last school year, we had a pretty big jump and 65 students met with the provider. This school year, we anticipate it to be probably about 70, maybe a little over. The need is growing increasingly yet. We'd like to hit every student that needs a provider or needs services. Unfortunately, we do have to do a lot of fundraising and grant writing to get money to pay our providers, so we can't, and you guys also need unlimited time, so if you, if you could figure that out.
I'll do my best.
So we still have a few barriers. I am so sorry, I lost where I'm at. So, we use an evidence-based form called the Strengths and Difficulties Questionnaire to gauge how our students are doing in the program. These forms are filled out prior to meeting with the stride provider and either at the end of the school year or if they transition out of stride. Based on these forms, our students saw a 40% decrease in emotional symptoms after meeting with the provider, 42% saw a decrease in relationship difficulties, and 52% saw a decrease in overall impact of difficulties on a student's life. So we are making some progress with students meeting with these providers. And I do also want to touch on a program that the Door County Health and Human Services has called Comprehensive Community Services. It's CCS. They are more of a wraparound program. They serve individuals with mental health or substance use. They are recovery-oriented, they're person-centered and strength-based. Sometimes if a student is referred to stride and meeting once a week is not enough, they can possibly transition to the CCS program, which is more involved, they have a team, more wraparound. Sometimes if a student is transitioning out of CCS, sometimes they go to a stride provider. Many of our stride providers are also CCS providers, so we kind of work very well together.
Can I say something really quick?
Yes.
The other nice thing about CCS is that it allows individuals that can work as skills providers, so it's not just treatment-based, but it can allow skills providers that can actually go into families' homes. They can actually go out in the community with the youth or with their families. So it's a really nice, it's a great program that really helps a lot of our families, especially because they can, it doesn't just have to be about the youth. They can actually go in and assist with the family as well.
And
Just thought I'd
provide
add
case
that.
Thank
management
you.
services.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Okay. So that brings us to Stride Creative and our Mighty Teen program. In the winter of 2020, we had partnered with an art therapist to do some programming. Ideally, we were going to use them as a one-on-one art therapy in schools. And then the pandemic happened, so we regrouped and said, how can we get more teens? How can we hit that tier 2 level, do some group work? And we came up with the Mighty Teen program. Mighty Teens is a 7-week art journaling club. It is not psychotherapy, but it does work on resiliency, anxiety, and stress management. Jody, our art therapist, right now still meets for 7 weeks after school virtually. Any Door County youth, it was 5th through 6th grade, is eligible to join. And then they get together once a week and do some art prompts that really work on some of those resiliency and anxiety skills. We are working to get some of the school staff trained so that they can also start offering it in schools for some kids that need it in small groups. And at this point, I would also like to point out our mental health navigator, Jen Aldridge. She is our Stride navigator. Jen's position really is to go into schools 1 day a week, into all 4 public school districts on the mainland, to offer support, programming, some mentoring, and be any sort of assistance that the school needs. Also to offer training, she did a QPR, which is question, persuade, refer for suicide prevention. Thank you, for a whole Sebastopol staff. Oh, I feel I'm all over the place right now. Okay. So besides the Mighty Teens, last summer we were able to get grant funding to do a summer art camp. This camp was done through a couple of groups through the county and a couple of our Stride Creative groups. They work collaboratively to create this art piece, which was really, really pretty. If you haven't seen it, it's over on Madison Avenue, over by the Animal Clinic of Sturgeon Bay. Again, it was just a 7-week program that allowed these groups of kids to get together, work on teamwork, leadership. We incorporated some of those Mighty Teen activities for resiliency into it, and really create this wonderful piece that they can see whenever they drive by. We again will be putting on an art camp this summer, so it will be open for 5th through 8th graders, and hopefully we'll get a good turnout and some more artwork that you guys can enjoy throughout the county. So in addition to that, the last thing that we offer is some online programming that is free for youth and adults. We have a website, stridecreativedc.com, that has those programs available for anybody to utilize. But there's also a lot of resources on there. The Mental Health Focus Group Resource Guide. We have suicide and crisis cards that is great for families to fill out to work with your youth on what do you do if you're in a crisis, or what do you do if you're struggling with anxiety, and just a lot of good local resources also on that website. I think I'm done. Yes. Thank you. Sorry, I'm a little sick, so my brain's not working fully.
You did fine. All right, our final speaker is Kelsey Christensen, who is the Juvenile Diversion Program Coordinator and will present the county's Juvenile Diversion Program. Kelsey received her bachelor's in criminal justice from St. Anselm College in Manchester, New Hampshire. Did I say that right?
You did. That was really good.
And her master's in community psychology from Alverno College in Milwaukee. Kelsey has a wide variety of experiences, from living on a remote island as a Peace Corps volunteer to working with Family Services Day Treatment Center in Green Bay. Kelsey has been working at Door County Health and Human Services for 5 years. She was initially hired as a case manager to help start the adult diversion program, Pathways, and provide case management services. Kelsey has since moved into the role of a court services coordinator, and with her amazing teams, has grown the court services program from 1 program to 3 programs. They are Pathways, the adult diversion program, Bridgeways for youth, and I believe that's what she's going to talk about today, and the Door County Treatment Court. And I just want those of you who have followed that, as League has, had their first 2 graduates recently. So,
Thank you.
that's impressive.
Thank you. Thank you. So I'll touch base on a little bit of all of them just so you guys have a good understanding. But what was unique about my position is that I was brought in by a grant funding. Started off with the sheriff, brought me in. She wasn't the sheriff at the time. She was still our jail administrator, but she brought me in just to start a adult diversion program. And essentially what diversion is, and it's actually moving to the title deflection. What it is we're trying to prevent people to come into our criminal justice system. I'm sure many of you guys can relate. We have a lot of individuals who may have mental health, may have substance use, or both. And a lot of that time, it can lead to interactions with law enforcement. It can lead to interactions with our criminal justice system, with the judges. And the whole point of deflection and diversion is to prevent that from happening. We want to allow people to get the help that they need and not have to keep coming back through our law enforcement. So that's the biggest part of what we focus on. So essentially my program is called the Court Services Programs. It was created just for me because I'm a big deal, apparently.
You are such a good thing.
I know. Just saying, it was created because we really need it, right? We're hearing these surveys, and I think we're just at the tip of the iceberg from what I've already seen just working the past 5 years and what I've been doing. So we started off with our adult diversion programs, and that is for individuals who are low-level individuals, meaning they have not been through our system often, right? and they are have to have a substance use disorder. Okay, and again, we're trying to keep them out of the system, so they do not receive any charges. That is the most important piece of that. They are brought into case management, and they are brought into treatment. Again, substance use disorder is a huge issue. Unfortunately, it is continuing to grow, especially with the increase in fentanyl being as accessible as it is and being it's in everything now. So it is increasing. So that is where, again, we're trying to get them into treatment, right? The jail is not the answer. We've figured that out. We have a great jail, but that is not what's working. So that was why that was created. What was really great then is things went really, really well with our program, so much so that the county wanted to add in a couple more programs. So we started Door County Treatment Court, which is for our higher level adults, meaning that they have been through our justice system quite a few times. They're facing felony charges. They have to plead guilty or no contest to a felony in order to be part of our Door County Treatment Program. And that is a longer program, whereas our deflection programs are running about 3 to 6 months. Our adult treatment court is running at least 16 months, if not longer. And as we just said, we had our very first 2 graduates, which was really exciting. Both people were in the program just under 2 years. Yeah. So, but great. I mean, we're seeing a lot of, the whole point is we're trying to restore our community. We don't want these individuals to be leaving our community. We want to help them. And so much that what's really great about these programs, these are our adult programs, but what's great is that we are collaboration. So we're working a lot with other county programs, areas, things of that sort, because so many of these adults have children that are here. And we do work very closely with our CPS, making sure that we can get these children reunited with their family and make sure that the adults are able to provide that healthy lifestyle in order to kind of stop the cycle. We're seeing a lot of that, right? You can ask anyone in our, I work and sit in the sheriff's office, and it's kind of an ongoing joke of like, oh, well, now this is the 3rd generation we're seeing of this family coming through our jails, right? So that's the whole point. We're trying to stop the cycle. We're trying to create healthier families. So, treatment court was started. Then we also were able to implement a youth diversion program. So our youth diversion program is very similar to our adult diversion program. It's a little bit different in that it is, there's specific offenses that trigger the individual being referred to adult diversion versus our juvenile justice. And what has been really unique about that program, it's been up and running for 2 years now. And what's been really unique about that program is that the youth that are being seen have this really unique opportunity. So instead of receiving citation or tickets, again, this is the whole point of deflection, right? We do not want them coming through. We don't want anything on their records. We don't want them meeting with a judge. We want them strictly getting the help that they need. So what they do is they are paired with our case manager, Liz Junian. She has been a rock star. And what she does with them is she gets them hooked up with a class that pertains to kind of where they're going down their path. So let's say they were caught with theft. We do have a class specific to stealing, right? So it's learning about what's going on, why their behavior is happening. The other piece is they can be connected to services. We do have a specific individual through the county that provides treatment. And she's actually a member, Lisa Barnaby. She's phenomenal. And so what we do is if that individual, let's say they do have to participate in a screening, if they have mental health or they indicate any sort of substance use, we get them put in treatment. And the individual is really given that individual catered to case management, case planning, and their treatment to get them the help that they may need. So as we're, looking at this survey, we're seeing a huge increase in what's going on with these youth, unfortunately, and the mental health and the The self-harm is increasing, especially in our female population. The other piece that we are seeing, it's really was a little shocking to hear that vaping has gone down, because that is
It's still up from 10
okay.
years ago.
That's true.
It's
Okay,
just
that's
that
yeah, just a little
in
dick.
there.
We can say it was us then.
Thank you for coming.
Yeah. But really it's because, we're seeing a ton of vaping. It's so accessible, it's so easy. What's even scarier is we are actually seeing an increase in the youth coming in with edibles and the accessibility to marijuana. Why that is so scary is because marijuana is not the same as what marijuana was in the 60s. It is extremely potent. So to put it kind of in rough terms, so in the 60s, if you were to smoke a joint of marijuana, you were probably getting about 20%. Nowadays, if you were going to take smoke anything with marijuana in it, you're probably having a potency of 90% of THC or marijuana. So it is significantly increased. There is a lot more going on. We're seeing an increase in early psychosis with children. Many of you probably know this, but our brain doesn't stop developing until we're at least 25. I think it's 25 or 26.
Yeah, 25.
And so you're putting in a chemical that's changing the way your brain is working. We're seeing a ton more increase of psychosis. Anxiety has gone up because of their use. Paranoia. Yep. So we are seeing some significant things that are really impacting our youth's mental health, our youth's ability to do well in school. Again, these are why these programs are coming up, and we're very grateful to have them. Like I said, Liz has been really great. She actually goes to each of the 4 main schools once a week. She meets with the school resource officers. School resource officers are always kind of keeping their eye out to see who could potentially use services. It is all law enforcement referrals to our programs. However, a person can self-refer themselves, which is also a really nice avenue. So even if they aren't doing anything criminal yet, that rises to the school resource officer or law enforcement having to get involved, our youth do still have the option of self-referring to our programs. Again, getting connected then with more resources for them. They will be paired with a case manager, which the nice part about having case management is that person, so our case manager, again, her name is Liz Junion, can actually go out and figure out what this individual needs and helps them get those next steps, whether it be, with our youth, sometimes it's finding that summer job, whatever those next steps might be. She can help with those pieces, which really helps our family. She also helps with transportation. As mentioned before, transportation is a huge barrier up here. We don't have public transportation. We do have door-to-door, which we're extremely grateful for. But she can help with those added barriers sometimes as well. So that's why the case management is extremely important, and why that's an added piece to why our programs are successful with our youth. So that is about it with our programs.
All right. Get over here to the microphone. All right, so we are going to take a 10-minute break, which means that 10 to 7, we will begin our questions. So you may want to partake of some refreshments, just get up and stretch, walk around a little bit, but at 10 to, we will be back, and you will have an opportunity to ask these ladies what you've been wondering about.
I'll make these, I have a little kind of summary of just the data.
So, who has a question? Mr. Powers?
Providers. Where are they? And from this sampling, the people coming into it are 100% female.
Oh, yeah.
Do you have a thought, theory on why people aren't going into the field?
Let me say to the audience that we don't have a microphone system for this auditorium. We have what we're using for the videotaping. So if you can't hear one of the questions, you need to tell us so that we can repeat it to you. If you don't tell me that, then we're going to assume you can understand what people are asking. Okay, go ahead, ladies.
Was that directed towards me?
I can start too.
Okay, so providers specifically for Door County, is that what you're asking?
Well, from what I understand, the state is in bad shape, the nation is in bad shape, but
Yeah.
Door County, northeast Wisconsin particularly, but Wisconsin.
Well, I can tell you that in general, the field, right, is there, the reward is significant if you do your job effectively. However, the burnout is also very significant as well. So I can say your employer is really important, right? The benefits are really important, but also like the success, like what you get in turn, what you get as well as what you give, right? Really, 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 really important. So,
Follow up,
Yeah.
why aren't people coming into it? You can't burn out until you get into it.
well, that's true. That's a good point. I can't answer that because I chose to come. I chose to come in.
I can just
Maybe
I
it's a
can just give
diversionary
something.
program.
Maybe.
Get them to burn out before they get in.
There we go. Maybe deflection. So one of the things that we are seeing as far as people coming into the field, it's not as appealing anymore. There's less of that. The other thing is the burnout has been heard. So you're looking at people who are looking at other options instead that may have less of burnout and higher pay. So we're also looking at different types of individuals. So the generation that is coming up right now really likes to have lots of experiences. So they're not looking as often at looking into just one type of field where they can stay and work for the next, 50 years, whatever it is. They're not looking at things like that anymore, so they're bouncing around quite a bit. Something that we're seeing, and as far as Door County specific, the reason why we have some of our biggest struggles, just speaking from having to sit and do a lot of hiring processing here, is that getting people to come live here is a struggle. We don't have housing, affordable housing, really and truly. It takes a while for candidates to find homes. And then once they are here, sometimes the community is not as engaging to our, especially if it's a person who's not originally from the area. It can be challenging. It can be a little isolating, especially because we are in a peninsula. There's not a whole lot of, you can only go down. So, unless you got a, yeah.
There's one road up and
in a
one
good
road
way,
down.
yeah.
It's fine.
But that's where some of the struggle that we're seeing, at least from the county aspect, because that's a huge struggle. It's not just in treatment, but case management. I mean,
Yeah.
our health and human services right now, we had 14 openings. It's a lot, and that's not just our program, but we're seeing that across the board in all different types of positions and different departments as well too. It's definitely a different market than what it was before.
I would throw out one other thing, and that's the demographics. Every industry has this problem because the generations coming up are not as large as the generations that are retiring. We just don't have the same numbers of people.
That's a good point.
So that's part of it too.
You
Other
mentioned
thoughts?
gender. This is a very small sample size. I can't tell you that I work with a lot of guys, men, and they're just as good at their jobs as we are at ours.
And you're the only true provider in a therapist side. The rest
Yes.
of us are different.
Yes,
program
true.
facilitators.
I'm a very small sample size.
Other questions,
Yeah, thanks.
gentlemen?
So I want to thank you ladies for coming
Thank you.
and giving all this information. It's kind of a two-part question. So it has to do with the kids in the school.
Yeah.
How are you communicating this to these younger children? Are we going class to class? Are we putting them into the auditorium? Sitting you ladies there, bringing in other people to talk to these children?
Define younger children for me.
Well, you said you went from 8th grade to senior high.
Yeah.
Are you putting these kids into the auditorium and talking to these kids? Are we going class to class in a smaller setting so that these kids actually feel comfortable with their peers to ask you ladies the questions that needed? Because I can tell you, if they're having issues with communicating, they're not going to do it in a big setting.
Yeah, totally.
Absolutely.
Okay? So that's my question. How are you getting through to these children that these programs exist and the help is there? Because obviously they feel that there is no help.
Yeah, yeah, that's a good question.
So Ally only does the middle high school for Sturgeon Bay, but we do have providers that provide from, some don't do kindergarten, but first grade all the way through high school. And then again, with like our mental health navigator position, she's in the schools working with all ages, trying to get them, she does Qigong, meditation, she works with the school counselors and offering programs. The schools and school counselors themselves all do a really good job of trying to implement SEL, social and emotional learning, from a young age, because they know that you need to start at that young age, and hopefully by the time they're teens, they know how to deal with this stuff. And then we also try to target parents so that parents know what to do with younger kids. The United Way has a partnership of children and families that work with parents on education on a lot of different things, but mental health is one of them. So there's a lot of ways that we are targeting those younger kids. And yeah, I don't. What?
Well,
The newsletter, for sure.
Oh yeah, we send out monthly newsletters to parents with local programming, programs coming up, what we're doing in the schools. Jen and I are really there to be a resource. Parents and school staff can contact us. We'll point them in the right direction, talk them through anything, and really get that conversation going.
We've also,
Because it sounds to me like you want to know, how does everybody know about this, just not the people that are referred?
Right, that's my question. How are these kids getting this information? I get that you're in the schools, but are we holding someone in a class that's actually in a classroom like this, you ladies sitting there and explaining this to these kids, that there is help,
yeah, so,
that there is opportunities for them to go off to the side and have a conversation?
it's actually really cool that you asked that, because Monday I'm doing a presentation at Southern Door. So every semester, actually, I do a presentation up at, and this is just, I volunteer my time, right? Like, it's actually a really cool program. Like, I don't know about Washington Island, but I know the 4 mainland schools, they do, in their FACE class, they do an Exploring Health Careers class, basically, a unit, in which they invite a variety of healthcare providers from usually Door County Medical Center or Bellin to come into school and talk. So it's actually really fitting that you asked that question, because I'm doing the presentation on Monday. So I go into the school, I do about a 2-hour long presentation, everything that I do, everything I see, everything that they can do for themselves, everything that they can ask, where they can go, right, so on and so forth. So I've been doing that for a couple of years now.
And you did just host the anxiety.
Well, and that's a good
class
point
at
too.
Sturgeon Bay.
So Sturgeon Bay, I think I actually recognize you guys. You guys were there. Yeah, you guys have heard me talk way too many times. Simon Rabas and I, he is a colleague of mine at Door County Medical Center. Him and I have done actually a couple presentations. The Sturgeon Bay School District, I forget the name of it. That's so bad of me, but I'm so sorry. They have, yeah, they have done like a like
Night, right?
it. No, it's like a community education event. I don't know, something like that. That's another big way of how we can communicate that to parents, but then also there have been some youth that
we
have
did
been
the diversion program, actually our youth diversion program did bring in speakers to each of the schools this past year with partnership with United Way and the AOD Coalition. And to your point, it is hard because you are doing it in an assembly, right? I mean, that is 100% challenging. The challenge that's also faced too when you're doing something like that. So our program was specific to the substance use, and we did bring higher speakers that came up from an organization out of Pewaukee that has individuals who are in recovery themselves, and so they were able to talk, and they were younger, so it was more impactful for the youth. But sometimes when you're talking about those smaller group settings, it's hard. First off, like, let's talk about staffing, right? Trying to get the people to do the staffing. The other piece too that can be challenging is if you're going to go that in depth and allowing kids to open up, you really do need that opportunity for kids to be able to have one-on-one with a provider in the moment if need be, because sometimes what you're talking about can be impactful or can, we call it triggering, can trigger an event for them. But again, that kind of goes back to that we don't have as many providers as we would like. So I think that would be a great idea, and something that our diversion program is looking into. We're able to, our case manager has been running both the adults and youth. We're splitting her position where now she can do just youth, and we're hiring somebody for adults. What's really great about that is that she's looking to do more prevention. And doing some more of those preventative talks and allowing that. So those are some opportunities and maybe some ideas that we can pull from.
And I would say too, like the guidance counselors and a lot of the school staff refer to these programs. They know Stride is there, so they identify the student that needs the help and hopefully is, referring them to a program.
I'm gonna date myself just a little bit.
I love it.
When I was in school, in about 3rd grade, I remember when DARE started.
Not successful.
And I mean started, it was the birth of DARE in 3rd grade for me. It was his very first time ever doing it, and he talked a lot about it. He would come once a week or whatever, and once a month, I can't remember what it was, to be honest. Gosh, I'm the youngest one in this room besides a couple of ladies.
I can't say the same thing.
No
That's why I said a couple.
Yeah.
But to my point, I mean, it starts small, obviously. And I guess that my question was, how are we gonna start this?
Yeah, I can tell you that specifically for Sturgeon Bay, I can't, because I'm just there, right? Well, and Algoma too, but specifically Sturgeon Bay, whenever they have some type of event, let's say like they catch a group of kids vaping in the bathroom, right? Or kid brought some alcohol to school, I don't know, whatever it might be, right? Like, they do hold assemblies. I actually wasn't able to see kids for one Wednesday morning because everybody was in an assembly to just say, hey, this is what's happening. This is how, if you need help, these are the avenues. And again, to your point, yes, it's an assembly. However, it is still an avenue, right? It is. It's a start. It's a start. And something that's really cool, and maybe that I'm just to toot my own horn, I'm just good at my job, is really cool is like a lot of these kids, like whenever I walk the halls, they will say, hi Ellie, and I'm like, I have no idea who you are, and they're like, oh yeah, you see my friend, blah 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 blah, blah, right? And so they know who I am now because I've been coming into school, and they know what I do, and they know that they can come to me if I'm free, or they can go talk to Mrs. K, right? And then they can get connected to me. So it's a lot. I think because we live in a small community, yes, there are some disadvantages, but I also think that that's a really big advantage for us because we are such a small, tight-knit community that a friendly face is helpful.
I guess my thought is not just to worry about the ones that are bad. We need to get the ones before they turn bad.
Yeah, prevention is the biggest thing, and we are going to see, so like I mentioned before, things might get a little bit worse with our substance use, given the fact that fentanyl is so easy right now. In fact, we just did a class, actually, our case managers did a class on the prediction for the increase in fentanyl because now it's being used so frequently. That's one of our biggest concerns right now is the preventative piece because we are, like I said, we have seen a couple cases now where kids have brought their parents gummies or tried to make their own candy out of the THC. What we're concerned about is we are going to start seeing some of the fentanyl that's coming in and be part of those gummies or the candy, whatever it might be. So that is something that we are really wanting to focus on this year, is focusing on the prevention piece and starting young.
Do you want to talk about Tall Cop?
Sure. So we had Tall Cop when I was with United Way, who's a national speaker, come in and just talk about drug trends. And
He was what we just watched.
oh,
heck
awesome!
yeah.
Again, yeah.
Jermaine Galloway.
Yeah.
And
Officer Galloway.
and so yeah, we had about 100 come
There
through.
was a ton, yeah.
120.
Unfortunately, not many educators.
Yeah. Yeah, but he
That's
just
true.
really he gave us the landscape of what we're looking at right now in Door County. So Delta 8 is legal, synthetic marijuana, and here's other things that your kids can buy over the counter and get high from. Trends with what's coming in the drug pipeline. So at that time, I don't believe fentanyl was a big issue, but now we know fentanyl's turning up everywhere and is super lethal in a very small dose. So just being cognizant of that. But that's where that prevention piece comes in. Your kids can't try. You can't try somebody's pill. You can't. It's not safe to think you're taking somebody's Oxy or Adderall or any of that anymore. Not that it was ever good, but now it's lethal.
Never good.
Now it's lethal. I mean, because it's laced with fentanyl in so many cases. So we haven't seen the overdose here yet, but like there's been tragic stories down at UW Milwaukee. They're everywhere. So yeah, that's where the prevention piece comes in. We need to get the message through, and the mental health piece too. It's kids learning to recognize and understand their own mental health and their bodies, and stay on top of positive mental health, less screen time, more social connections, being engaged at school, having goals to work towards, having a supportive home life, and a circle around them. So that's the big piece with mental health right now. It's baby steps a lot of the time. I mean, the public health department does head a mental health focus group, so we bring together all of our partners that work in Door County in this space. We idea share. We do little outreach initiatives to give resource cards out. You might have seen us at the parade on St. Patrick's Day.
I love that.
We're putting together community events like this and participating, and just putting signage up that the 988 resource line is there. So if you are in crisis or feeling suicidal, that there is a 988 line you can call or text now. Just trying to get the community on board with knowing the resources that are there, although sometimes limited when there's crisis. Like, we'll connect, but also if we can prevent crisis, we want to do that work. We want to get upstream and get ahead of it before crisis is imminent.
If you want to, you can Google Tall Cop, and like a bunch of free videos come up.
It's phenomenal.
He is a phenomenal man, phenomenal man, and so knowledgeable. That goes for any of you. It's Tall Cop.
Tall Cop.
TALLCOP.
He's 6'9", I think.
Yeah, he's really tall.
I have a picture next to him, and it was awesome.
I can imagine. He will help.
idol.
He does a lot of like Shauna said, drug trends, right? Projection. So it's helpful, and how they correlate with mental health.
Other questions,
Yeah.
Karen?
You might have said this when I wasn't in here, but what are your success stories?
We have
Tell
some
me
really
success
good success stories.
Yeah, you want to talk?
Okay, I have a really
Thank you
cool
for
one.
that question.
Yeah, I
That
have
is a
real- I
fantastic
actually-
question.
I have a really good one, you guys. It's a good one. All right, so we had a youth who was referred. He was actually came in as a self-referral, so that is an option, like I said. But this youth was he's going into his 5th year of high school, and he was homeless. He was doing a lot of drugs, heavy drugs, so not just THC, not just alcohol. He was doing the hard stuff, meth, some fentanyl in there. And like I said, homeless. The school was phenomenal. They were really trying to help him. They would wash his clothes for him, things of that sort. But he really needed help. So he came into our program. He worked with Liz. Liz was able to get him a job that had housing. He was able to live on his own, finish high school, which was great. He no longer does any of those hard drugs. He was with us for about 2 years, actually, because he then transferred into our adult program just so that we could kind of help him out. He was part of the CCS program that we spoke about as well. So we were able to really capture this kid and get him a lot of resources, and he's doing phenomenal. He has been just our poster child, and he, like, the difference from when you first saw him show up to today, he's got weight on, looks clean, and he's got a girlfriend who's a very positive person. So that's a good success
amazing.
one. Yeah.
Well, I want to share, I usually have my quotes, but I don't. But a student that actually sees Allie, you may
stop.
know who it is. I do not because of HIPAA, but she had said that she saw Allie for about 2 years and that her anxiety and panic attacks rarely happen anymore, and that she hopes to continue seeing our Stride provider, and her grandma and mother are also very happy that she's able to meet with Allie.
That's cute. Thanks, Cami.
Yeah. We do have more providers besides Allie.
Yeah.
I'm just going to let you know. She's just sitting right next to me. Yeah. She's sitting right next to me.
Success story. I do know who you're talking about. That's really cute.
That's good to hear.
Yeah.
If you think of any others as we go along,
Yeah,
just
I'll-
interject.
Perfect.
Yes, sir?
My question is related to the gentleman behind me, but more specific. If a teacher senses something about a student, but the student is not giving any indication that they are interested in seeking help, can the student intervene? Can the teacher intervene? And if so, how does the teacher go about this?
That's a great question.
Can you go
Do you
back?
want? I've actually had this happen to
go
me.
ahead.
Yeah. So, teacher can't necessarily do a whole lot, right? Because that's technically outside of their lane, right? But I can tell you, I literally just had, maybe a couple months ago, had a case come in. The guidance counselor came to me and said, hey, we have this student, right, who has been struggling really hard, and teachers haven't been noticing. One, she's not handing in any homework. She's failing almost all of her classes, coming to school late, so on and so forth, right? What can we do? And I was like, well, I can meet with her, right? Like, that's all that we can do, right? So I took some time out of my day. I went to school. I introduced myself. Like, we just brought her down to the office. I introduced myself, offered her what I had available in terms of resources, right? And explained the process, explained everything that could happen, and she's actually now a student of mine, so that I see at school. So I can tell you that teachers don't necessarily have a whole lot of control other than, or necessarily can intervene outside of just communicating that to the guidance counselor communicating that to the provider deciding on in terms of what they have the availability to do, and then taking it from there. But you can't necessarily do, I say this all the time, you can't necessarily do a whole lot for a child unless they want something to change for themselves. So,
And I think that's not just kids. I mean, that's for
Adults.
everybody.
Oh, totally.
Yeah, I mean,
Totally.
it goes across the board, but they have to want it themselves too. That's the
you can't want it more for
challenging.
them,
Yep.
which is so hard. I deal with that every single day.
Jen?
What about the barriers of the parents? Sometimes you have a child who is in a neglectful situation. They need help, want help, but the parent is not being cooperative. How do you deal with that?
Great question too.
Just from our program standpoint, unfortunately, there's not a whole lot we can do, and we have run into that problem. It's so in order to be part of our program, it has to be, you have to sign off, the parent has to sign off, and the youth has to sign off. Now we try to kind of spin it. Like I said, we offer our services. We say, hey, we'll take them to and from their appointments, so it's not on you. Try and, we give out gift cards, things of that sort to kind of give some incentives to make it that way. But we've definitely had that happen, especially when a parent is afraid that being part of our program will draw light to some negative things that are going on in the home. And that we have run into that, unfortunately, where our kids do get pulled. And there's only so much you can do, especially if you can't bring in, if we don't have just cause for any other reason. So it can be challenging.
Yeah. Sorry. I was just gonna also speak to that too. A lot of time, the same for Stride, right? Like we need parents to sign off and give consent for us to be able to see a student in school. I can tell you that we do everything that we can in order to explain the entire process. Like before I was a stride provider, a colleague of mine, Callie, was a stride provider, and she actually, like, we had a parent who was actually in jail, and she drove to jail and went and like explained the entire process to the parent who was in jail and got the paperwork signed and was able to then see the student. That was before my time. I can probably say that I probably would have driven to jail too, but Callie did. And so like we try to mitigate any type of barrier that we possibly can on our end to be able to provide the student the services that they absolutely need.
Other questions?
Oh,
go ahead.
I'm sorry.
Well, I can see you in the glare. So go ahead.
A follow-up to that is you saw this student that a teacher, the guidance counselor came to you. Can you just give general information, or did you have to get a parent consent before you randomly met with this young lady that a few months ago, whatever?
Oh yeah, no, because I wasn't providing any type of service to her.
Just information.
Right, I was just providing her information. So I didn't need any type of consent for that. It was more just like a, hey, my name is Allie, and this is what I can bring to the table.
Gotcha.
What's your name? What's going on? Kind
And
of thing. And I didn't, like, there was no services.
Or anything like that. Gotcha.
And we do,
Information.
some of our stride providers do actually go into the classroom to offer just some kind of services to the teacher, you know, how to go about classes if you have disruptions or things like that. So they do go in and do that without it being one-on-one psychotherapy.
Okay. Mr. Kohout?
You find that as time goes on and these programs are demonstrating success, that resistance to entering the programs are lessening, or are you still grappling?
I believe so. We've had one school wonder how to make their provider more involved in the culture, and the school goes, well, I don't know, they're just there, and all the kids know her now, and she's just always around the hallways, and she's just kind of become a staff member. I mean, she's not. We've really, I feel like, had a lot of less resistance for parents wanting their kid in stride. Now I personally haven't had any calls this year about it, so maybe that's why. But also, too, we had mental wellness kits that have gone out twice now to our youth with coping mechanisms and fidget toys and things like that, where I feel like getting these tools and, you know, things out there for everybody is really decreasing that stigma on getting the help that our kids need.
And stigma is a really good thing to talk about. I mean, we all know it, but stigma is huge, especially in our community up here. So part of that has been that awareness and trying to get out there and do these talks and, like Shauna said, trying to get out and do the parade just so that we're normalizing the fact that mental health happens and that, you know, substance use is going on. That's really important too, as far as making sure that there isn't that resistance. And our community does talk, like you know, it's a small community, but even smaller so, if they are actively using or do have mental health, they tend to stick together, and so they do talk to each other. And so we have had that happen actually with our participants. Will say like, hey, you really should go meet with Ms. Liz. She'll really help you get some resources. So they do. It definitely, as the programs are going, I would agree that they do. It opens it up that people are more receptive.
Did you have a question?
Talk about it.
100%.
Less the stigma.
Yeah.
Yes, 100%.
We kill the stigma.
Yes, 100%.
But I mean, it's also that generational thing too.
Yes.
Where it's like they don't want to,
Yeah.
nobody wants to talk about it, just brush it under the rug.
Yeah.
And
Don't air your dirty laundry.
yeah, airing your dirty laundry.
Derek, did you have a question?
Yeah, okay, so listening to the presentation and stuff, one of the statistics that is pretty alarming to me, which I would say I feel like I'm part of, because when I was in high school, junior high, I did suffer from depression, and the thoughts of suicide did happen, and also I am part of the LGBT community. So that's like a triple whammy there. But anyways, I know nowadays, being part of a organization in the county, they do have, most of the schools, if not all of them by now, have some kind of saga group and stuff like that, which is great. However, from what we've heard, feedback from teachers, they are still getting pushback from administration by not like publicly displaying like they're an ally type deal, that they can't do any kind of so on and so forth. And I feel that could be part of the situation of why they feel, because the students or the kids cannot feel like they can exist because the administration's the ones that's running the school don't want them to be who they are. And is there something you guys are trying to do to change that as well?
I think Jim took off, but Jim at Jack's place is trying to do youth groups specific to the LGBT community. Again, that's a supportive group, though that's not reducing the stigma of being gay. And so at this point, no, I mean, I haven't, unfortunately, and that's actually one of the things that is in my one sheet here is supporting the most vulnerable populations by boosting them up, by making them accepted. I think it's an important piece so that people feel comfortable in their own skin and with who they are. Do you have more on that? Yeah.
Well, I think it's just like with, parents with kids. As much as you tell the parents, they should really get into that. We can't make them. We'd love to tell the schools what they should do. Are they going to follow us? No. But we do have pretty good relationships, I think, where, having a mental health provider in a school 10 years ago would probably not have looked pretty great.
Yeah.
We're working our way in there, and I feel like with each of these small steps, with, these educational talks or getting programs in there is going in the right direction. Probably not where we should be at all, but hopefully we will get there.
And I mean, yes, we are up against a conservative population landscape here, 5 school districts to try and encourage to adopt all these acceptance behaviors and take the time to get your student body to accept everybody for who they are. And it's a battle. I mean, we need to keep it in the forefront. And it's a big piece of mental health. So I appreciate that. And it's something, I plan to be at Pride, supporting it. United Way does a great job, supporting. And can we get our schools to say, we accept you for who you are and we stand behind you? And
it kind of goes back to the stigma too, right? Unfortunately, there's a stigma with that population. So again, as part of it's just getting out there and voicing.
But yeah,
It has 100%.
I was gonna say, like,
We get a Pride event.
The Sturgeon Bay.
Yep.
Flies the pride flag during June. That's huge.
part of the Sturgeon community. I can
Gone over this gentleman's question several times, so go ahead.
Can I just finish?
That's all right,
I just
no.
have one other comment for his question. Is it okay if I just make that comment real quick?
Absolutely.
I can tell you that a big difference from last school year to this school year that I have seen, and I've been in Sebastopol School Districts, Sturgeon Bay, Southern Door. I haven't done Bretl, so I don't get up to Fish Creek that often. But I have seen all gender bathrooms now, not just male or female, right? And that has been a huge transition that I've recognized and I've noticed from last school year to, well, even like 2 school years ago to now, right? And so I can tell you that, like, the changes are happening, right? They may be really small, they may be insignificant, but they are significant, right? And we're getting there. We're getting there. Sorry, that was just one comment that I had thought.
I'd appreciate it.
Yeah.
I'm a former Uber, and in my hometown right now, there are 17 places that are legally growing pot. And it's legal in Michigan. There's a dispensary there who can hardly keep up for the demand.
Yeah.
Has there been any studies as to, say, the incidences of mental health problems in, say, like Marinette County or Menominee County, Michigan? Has there been any studies as to the amount? Is there a greater degree of mental health issues because of the access to the?
I'm gonna say probably.
I would, so
Most likely.
part of the problem is that they make money.
Oh, absolutely.
So we run into the issue of you're not going to find a whole lot of people who would back that study because they don't want that getting out there. So that's something that, so I actually grew up in Colorado, and so my family's from Colorado. And they actually all moved out of Colorado after things became legal because it got so bad. However, if you were to go talk to any of the politicians or any of the, you know, big things that are going on down in Colorado, they would never mention that. Even though there is a direct correlation. Again, you have to remember that politics and tax money does play a part of that, unfortunately.
Yeah, and your legal marijuana still goes illegally across state lines, and we have legal Delta 8, which is light weed, but it's taken in abundance. It's not so light anymore.
It's full of chemicals.
And yeah, it's synthetic THC. It's still getting people high. They can do more than this.
And there's still no regulation on
Right.
it. Yeah.
So yeah, no, I would say, I mean, I've heard the horror stories of kids in a psychotic state jumping off a building. I mean, it's causing problems for sure, but right, are there studies to back that up? No, we can kind of trend reported, you know, marijuana use against reported mental health use, or mental health issues.
We are approaching the witching hour, so last question, Mr. Powers.
Question on, coming off of these last two on data, the organizations that you belong to, have they begun or do they have a methodology for beginning to collect data? Because you're doing stuff, but it's all anecdotal. So if we sit down with our representatives as a league and can start to give them actual data, and we can take all the trends and things that you've been pointing out, but from the programs, and also for yourself to find out what's working and what isn't working. So the question is really, are they thinking about, have they begun to collect data?
Yep, we started data collecting from the moment we started. Because again, our programs are all grant funded, and they're not gonna, I mean, you can't be grant funded all of the time. So we need to be able to prove our programs are successful to the county board in order for county board buy-in. So that is something that we have been collecting. What's cool is that we are actually going to be working with UW Extension to start answering some of those big questions and actually tracking recidivism and tracking some of those big things to show. It's hard because when you're first starting a brand new program, you really need 5 years to show where the program went, because there's hiccups, there's things that we didn't do right in the beginning and things that we're learning. But yeah, we have been tracking that, and that's something that is very important to us, is the data piece of it.
Yeah. Is there anything that jumps out at you as you look at it?
As we're looking at the data, I would say some of the things that we have had a decrease in alcohol consumption, increase in vaping. Yep. So I know, darn. But the other thing we were actually talking about earlier is just seeing some correlation between who's being referred through our youth. And I would say probably like 90% have IEPs or are struggling in school in some way. I don't know what that means, again, but that's just another thing that I think jumps out at us.
And Cami gave some statistics right at the beginning about the survey data from the STRIDE students and the reported successes, reduced anxiety and...
Yep, so we use an evidence-based form prior and post meeting with the STRIDE provider. We have one form from a referring teacher or school counselor, and then last year we started implementing a self-reported form, so the student actually meeting with the provider fills out that evidence-based form prior and post STRIDE services.
And as so far as just a provider perspective, at Door County Medical Center, we collect data every single time that we meet with the patient, right? We give them, again, evidence-based, it's called a PHQ-9 and a GAD-7. Those are two brief assessments that they complete, and we track throughout their entire time with us. So even like a office visit number 72, right? They are still getting a PHQ-9, they are still getting a GAD-7 to track trends.
All right. We hope you have learned a lot this evening. There's still time to talk to them after. I don't mean to shut that down, but we want to be prompt and respectful of their time. Remember to let others know that this program can be viewed on YouTube through our Facebook page and our website. Let's give our speakers a round of applause. Thank you for coming. good evening. Well done. And I'm sure if you walk up and speak, they'll probably answer another
Yeah.
question.